Okay, and I think the rest you know each other. So colleagues, these panels can always, they can work or they can't work. I've got your questions from yesterday. I tried to sort of sift them into some sort of semblance of order. I also had a few people out there who were insistent that they get their questions across. So before I tackle those questions, I think I'm going to honor my promise to those people about them stating, and I think it was the two people in the, oh, you got your question, it was yourself. I think it was only you. Was there somebody else who I promised?
It was Martin.
And Ayanda, okay. I'm gonna, but these are specifically gender-based questions. Right. And so what we'll do is, normally there's like a lot of hands that want to speak, and obviously we can't just take everybody. So I'm just going to try and move it around a bit so that the same people don't get the shine all the time. And if there's nobody else and it's just you and you've been talking a lot, that's great, we'll have you again. Okay, so to honor that promise, you're up first. How's that?
Good day. My name is Wellington Ngubane. I'm from University of Johannesburg. My question is, what are we doing to educate the male students at university level, because are the perpetrators, so that we can just minimize the risk that is happening in terms of GVP?
Okay, his question is, what are we doing to educate the males? And I guess not only what are we doing, but what can we do? All right, so who's going to bat first? And then after you guys, just to pass it around, indicate to one another.
As part of one of the job in higher health is to engage peer-to-peer programs, and which is the second curriculum I spoke about, capacity development. We've just worked up a new chapter in the curriculum, which is specifically now built on gender-based violence. But even under the gender-based violence, we've newly built a chapter called He for She. It comes directly from UN Women's Campaign, which is how does a he stand for she. And it is basically to now engage on men forums. And men forums specifically on, not only because men is a problem even in HIV, because the biggest spread of HIV has always been noted as men as a carrier. So men has to be engaged on this. Men is the where the biggest element of transactional sex happen. Men is the one where the sugar daddies and all those issues happen. So men is not only the issue with drugs and alcohol, we've also noted the highest amount of abuse among our students when you compare it to ratio of gender is again men. So we specifically now built forums now at men at every campus across our institutions, about 420. This program is going to be rolled out as I speak to you from 1st of October only, because it recently got accredited. So we're hoping that probably another 1 million young students are going to go through this from next year and getting assessment, which should be men in private. Just from my side.
You've got a mic for that those two tables, if you guys can just... Okay, just keep pushing till the green light comes to you live. Yeah.
Right. I think from our institution, Nelson Mandela, we have created spaces where men or male students can be able to discuss issues that affect mostly men or them. There's a program called Singamadoda. In that program, they are able to discuss perhaps, because we can never understand from a female perspective why male will do certain things, but if they gather together in that space, being motivated into becoming better individuals or better citizens, I think that can actually work out very well. But that space of Singamado has turned out very well in terms of creating that positive atmosphere around men and how they treat actually female students off campus and on campus as well.
Take a go.
Okay, is that beautiful? Yes, it is. Obviously, I come from the UK, so we do have these problems in the UK as well. And I know at our institution, at our university, we one of our courses that's taught is child psychology, and we have our students under the guidance of lecturers working within secondary schools. Now, secondary school in the UK is for pupils from the age of 11 to 18. So they're engaging with 12, 13-year-olds on issues about consent. So trying to sort of tackle that issue before it arrives at our door, and it's a much bigger issue and a harder issue to actually tackle. So that certainly happens within Cardiff, where we work. The same kind of education is done and will be being done for our fresher students who come through the door now, all about issues of consent. And it seems like you shouldn't have to educate people on that, but it is necessary, we're finding. And we're finding using social media is very good. So a big lecture to a lecture theatre full of students on the issue of consent doesn't always hit the mark, we found. But what we have found is short, impactful social media videos and messaging has a better effect for our students anyway. And then we give more in-depth training to our staff. We work locally with charities who deal with domestic abuse, domestic violence, sexual violence, etc. in spotting the signs in students, male or female, that may be happening. Do we solve the problem in doing all of that? I'd like to think we make a positive impact into it, but it still continues and we still have those issues, certainly.
Okay, did you want to say something?
No, I think I did mention what we do.
Okay, so it seems to me that it sounds like the peer-to-peer thing is a big tool, men-to-men, and of course ongoing sensitization through whatever channel we have, social media. You know, when incidents occurs, that there are post-mortems with affected people, and of course a lot of this goes hand in hand with trauma counselling afterwards, for perhaps people in the corridor or the unit and so forth. Okay, Ayanda, you're up next. Were you dozing off there or were you thinking? Okay.
Greetings to everyone. My name is Ayanda Martin. I come from Nelson Mandela University, Protection Services. The question that I want to raise now is more or less or similar to the question that was raised by the gentleman there, but mine is slightly different. The question is, we normally see the activeness from the GPV members when there's an incident happened. For instance, someone's being raped or they're reporting an incident of sexual harassment. So my question is, do they have those awareness programs whereby they educate a female child as to how to behave, to come up with suggestions to say, for instance, when they're going out for clubbing, they're having some drinks, after they're having a glass of wine, to finish up that glass of wine before going to his bathroom. Because what normally happens, there's something that get poured on their drink, then they don't know what has happened. They realize the day after that actually something has happened to them, they've been assaulted. So we normally get some kids are being reported 2 weeks after, which does make matters very complex. We understand. So those are the challenges that we face in protection services of issues that have been reported some 2 weeks later after the incident.
So I'm just hearing there the issue of smart drinks, spiking, and so forth. You know, to what role, to what extent is it our duty to educate perhaps if I'm interpreting that correctly, the survivors on, not only the survivors, the masses. Any comments from your side?
Can
We'll take you first.
Okay.
Just can you get the orange and the green light?
Okay.
Green and again. Oh, this one's battery's gone flat.
All right. We have at UJ, we have partnered with the Transformation Department, mainly to address the gender-based violence incidents. And we have lined up the awareness campaigns in that regard. But not only that, but we do run training with mainly for now female students, security training on how they can protect themselves even when they are being attacked. But further than that, we also educate them give the safety tips. like when you are drinking, you don't have to leave your drink and go, because we did have a lot of incidents where students went clubbing and then the following day they don't even remember what happened. But also, we also encourage the men during our training that it does not necessarily mean like what she said, that if I'm drunk then you must take advantage. But the challenge that we still have to look at is how do we protect the men who has been accused of this until he's proven guilty? Because you would realize that that's a challenge we're facing now, since with this hype up of GBV and all the matches that has been going on, there's a lot of cases that are now popping in. And I've heard in one of the universities here that one of them, a group came and said, we know the rapists, we would want to identify them, and they were taken to the presidents and they said it was there, and I thought that was dangerous, because remember at that time, even if you are accused, you remain an innocent person. So not only do we train the women, but we also train the men to say, as much as you have the right to go drink and go in any area as a woman, not all men are actually buying into this. They will still take advantage. So you're not going to go around at night and say, I've got the right to go at night because men do the same. You are actually exposing yourself. So we're running training, we do awareness campaigns, safety tips, and it really helps us a lot. Thank you.
Anybody else?
Yeah, I think the issue of awareness campaign is vital when we're talking about that, Mr. Martin. And I remember even last week we had, because Campus Health in NMU is having a health week this week, so we had a health day last week, and we did campaign as well on GBV, and while collaborating with Campus Health on their health day. And also we have, to actually reach closer to the students, we have a slot on Matiba's radio. We have Campus Radio every Wednesday morning, where we talk about GBV issues and what to do when you actually go out partying. And if you would remember, I think it was in August, on the 10th of August, there was the event that unites the 4 universities of the Eastern Cape, your Walter Sisulu, University of Fort Hare, Rhodes University, and also NMU, where we did also a drive campaign there as into the safety drinking tips for our students as well. Not only focusing on females only, but the main focus was actually them. 80% we were giving out the tips to them. So there's that campaign called the Memeza Yellow Whistle campaign, where more often than not, we actually go out and be on the ground to give out those pamphlets and the yellow whistles, which are most of the students have, where they know that if you feel unsafe, you can blow that whistle, and other students would know that you are actually in trouble or you feel unsafe at that point. So yeah, thank you.
To strengthen everything that's been said so far, we do similar initiatives in the UK, and they're needed, and you need to keep plugging away at them. Something that we've done, this might sound a little bit alien to people here, but something we've done in South Wales, our local police force is South Wales Police. We work very closely with them, and they have a scheme that runs, which is a police student volunteer scheme. So there are 3 universities in Cardiff, and they draw volunteer students, the police, from those universities, and they work with them. So the students get the benefit of experience. Maybe some of these want to go into policing as a career, so they benefit from that. But something that's laid on every Wednesday night, which is the busy student night in Cardiff, and on weekends, is a student safety bus. And the universities pay for it collectively. It's always driven by a police officer, but it's always crewed with 2 or 3 police student volunteers. And it will drive around the streets of Cardiff, it sounds dodgy when I say this, looking for vulnerable students, looking for someone who's maybe had too much to drink and looks a rough. And it will pick them up and take them home. Often these students have had way too much to drink, or maybe have taken drugs, so won't remember any of this. So they put the wristband on the student, get them home, put them to bed, make sure they're safe. And then in the morning, the student wakes up and sees the wristband on his or her arm. and can scan it and look at the website, and it then takes them to educational resources about drinking too much or taking drugs. And that's been quite successful, I think, in safeguarding students in Cardiff, because a few years ago we had a spate of sexual assaults on students during freshers, when everybody was drinking too much, and the students are at their most vulnerable. And the student safety bus was something that sort of took off after that. And it's well known in Cardiff. The bus also liaises with bars and nightclubs in town. So if a bouncer on the door of a club or a bar thinks a student is vulnerable, they can just get straight, they have a radio, they can get straight in touch with the student safety bus, and then they can get taken home. So it's something that's developed over time, and it works quite well for us.
I think we, as Higher Health, we started investing funding into giving grants to each and every community radio station, and specifically our campus radio station. As much as Nelson Mandela University and UG are here, we have now an army of about 192, and I use the word army, of 192 radio journalists in our campuses who are now being capacitated and trained about gender-based violence and issues of HIV in all the 7 areas that I spoke about. But the aim is now 42 times a week. The aim is not to play the same content, to integrate it with musical, comic-y way, because these radio journalists know how to engage the youth. So rather than giving them a content, it's better to capacitate and give investments to them. What has happened here is, eventually, that 82% of our students in universities do not listen to the big FMs like the 702s and they are poor. They don't have much connection in social media except for WhatsApp. But how do you communicate on WhatsApp? So I agree with you, sir. Social media is a great platform. But in poor TVET colleges and our different dynamics that we have in the sector, sometimes these simple things like radio station, which is the most cheapest form of communication, it works for us. Unitra FM, anybody from Walter Sisulu here? If Walter Sisulu is here, Unitra FM, I just want to inform, has a listenership of 800,000 young people in Transkei, which is a huge listenership. And I think if we send messages through that in education, it's a powerful weapon. Last part, Rob, is we studied about, I was in New York the other day where we were discussing about who becomes a rapist eventually. And there was a study that discovers what makes a rapist is a child who's between 14 years old to about 21 years old. In between that, he's trying to explore sexual behavior, and he's trying to explore his body. This is a time of adolescence. He wants sex, and that's the reality of things. The question is, he tries his normal route of sex, but sometimes he does struggle and fail. And this is the age, and specifically in universities, a chance of having a sexual assault and doing a rape over a peer is much more easier than in any other surrounding. And that eventually becomes the first try, and then becomes the second try. And then drugs and alcohol exaggerate. Family, obviously, where he comes from, most of our families, we have broken children. 70% of our children are born with single mothers. They've seen trauma in their growing up ages. So we got challenges. But the aim is that the first year, when they come into the higher education system, how can we then immediately put into the face-to-face peer education program? How do these health days that they're speaking about, which you call them First Things First campaign or health and wellness days, how do we bring them in joint collaboration with the first years? Can you do early risk assessments that we are now putting in principle for the first years? A high risk, there's a questionnaire now where you can, in one page and within 2 minutes, you can know whether you're vulnerable to gender-based violence or you have prone to domestic violence at home. Because 85% of sexual violence is actually partner violence. And how do you prevent partner violence in the partners at home or in the campus or in the college? So these are simple things that can be put in place. Something called high-risk assessments, face-to-face collaboration, community radio programming, intensified way of educating people. But that's where prevention can come.
Now I'm going to move it around. I need to just give that gentleman a chance. Interesting points there that you raise. Let's come across here to the UFS.
Morning everyone. My name is Mbuto Kaulela. I'm from the UFS Otma campus. I just want to ask something from Higher Health. What contribution or influence you have on universities on development of sexual harassment policy? Because I've got a problem universities will have policies which also will defeat itself when it comes to implementation. Now, there's also an issue of jurisdiction. I had a case in Mkwakwa. In Mkwakwa, we've got about 7,800 students, 2,000 staying on campus, 5.8 off campus. 80% of those students, they are coming from KZN. It means about 200 Ks from their homes. They are staying off campus. Now, we had a case where it was a sexual assault, student against student. And then we assisted the student up to the case, went to court. This boy was found guilty, sentenced 5 years, suspended for 5 years. But I'm still struggling for university to take action because the student attending classes, the survivor, in the same class. Last week I was called when the survivor couldn't cope because the suspect was sitting just in front of her. Time and again looking at her, university couldn't do nothing. They talk about jurisdiction. But these people are also same student in the same campus because this thing happened off campus. It doesn't help to deal with the issue of GBV if now our own system defeats itself, we cannot apply the rules. We have a system called SART.
Okay, I'm going to be strict. I need to just move it around. I think you made your point. Is there any comment here that...
In 2016, just to inform everyone, the Minister for Education asked Higher Health, which used to be called HATES, to develop a policy on sexual and gender-based violence. Dr. Wio Tom, who was the Vice Chancellor of Fort Hare at those days, was called in to become the chairperson. We developed a technical task team, and we had MRC, Correctional Services, NPA, Social Development, Health, Women, everybody in the same room, along with our SRCs, SOUTs, and TVET colleges. It took us about 2.5 years for intense consultations. Consultations at the management level, consultations at the student union levels, NIHAVU level at every level, and then of course it went out. For the first time this year, after 2.5 years of marathon, Minister Pando in April announced the policy for public comments. So which means that the cabinet has already approved that policy, which is the National Higher Education Policy on Gender-Based Violence. So for that reference, everybody must know we have got a policy. We are the first sector in entire Africa that has now got a policy on sexual and gender-based violence. It's a framework. Now what does that policy framework tell us? Which warrants all 26 universities. And at this moment, there are about 6 universities that have a policy on sexual and gender-based violence. And those 6 universities are sitting here, who know that they have a policy. Other universities, there are about 8 universities whose policies on the draft phases. And they are still in the process of being consulted or going through its phases in the universities. But other universities are still lagging behind when it comes to it. Once the cabinet signs this policy, which should be before the end of this year that we are trying to push, it will now enforce every vice chancellor to develop a policy within a stipulated time which should be aligned to the sectoral policy assigned by the Department of Higher Education Training. The same policy framework then becomes automatically the policy framework for TVET colleges. Please, that policy is very critical because it's got minimum standards. That minimum standards also applies to CAMPROSA and security because of issues about campus audits, safety audits, safer campuses, these are all going to be now coming in principle. So I think it's a very relevant question what you have asked us. And one of the biggest tasks that remains, again, not only capacitation with bodies like CAMPROSA, bodies with like campus health HODs, bodies like the health transformation offices, the gender offices, to work in developing university-based capacitation. Not everybody has WIT systems or role systems. Every university is unique, and every university has its own identity eventually. I always believe that people think WITS has a bigger problem, but nobody realizes how much work actually happens in water systems. It's just that somebody will have to go and see the depth of it. And so institutional-based policies will become a reality. And one of the job of higher health will be to put a technical expert to work with those universities that need technical guidance on developing such policies and able to implement those policies. Because the word policy is just one word, but what comes out of policy is a strategic plan that every institutional vice chancellor must execute and put investments to it. And that investment means upgrading the systems that have been in the past probably useful, but needs with time changes.
Okay, so I'm putting myself in the position of the protection services people with their feet on the ground. and their policies. And I guess somehow we've got to get that clutch, like in a motor car, for the policy to engage with your work, to make it, to deal with that situation that you spoke of with the perpetrator in front and the survivor behind you. Okay, it's a bit tricky now because there are a couple of questions, but I think this gentleman was first, so I'm going to just drift across here. And then whoever glares at me the hardest will get the first question.
Okay, good morning everyone. My name is Manuel from the University of Limpopo. In fact, I've got two. Firstly, I think it is partially answered so because I was gonna make a request or ask if it's possible for CAMPROSA to come with a standardized or a standard guideline, in fact, that is going to guide all, especially professional level, all the universities within our country when it comes to the handling these cases of GBV. And then the next thing, I just need a comment from the table there. We looking at GBV, and I think we have identified some of the causes. And from the doctor's presentation today, it was indicated that alcohol also play a huge role, especially when it comes to destroying our country, so to say. Is it advisable for universities to have a liquor bar in the university premises?
Okay. Thank you. Then you're next. Is it Jonathan? Yes, so the question is quite clear. Let's. I'm not going to put the doctor in the spot. How about you?
Okay, I think that has been raised a lot of times, especially with the universities. And obviously, UJ is also not immune there. If you ask me, it's not. We have seen that if you're looking at most of the students who are with NEFSAS, in the past, they used to even try, I'm not sure if that happens even in other universities, they even tried to cash the money that was before the new status now, just to be able to access the money for liquor. And I have recently read an article that was saying when an analysis was done on how, on a number of students buying books this year in view of the change of the schedule, you know how it's changed, now they get cash into their bank accounts. That the study shows that the buying of books has actually dropped drastically. So I can imagine if we have those areas on campus. I understand the other side, that they're saying we are getting marked when we go out to go drink and all that and when we come back. But I can imagine what's going to happen on the campuses if they know you don't even have to go out the gate. You just go there in the corner. Maybe in other universities, I'm not sure if they have implemented that. But for us, especially in Joburg, it's going to be a challenge. As it is, we are trying to get one a brewery, let me call it, next to the campus, because that is creating a chaos, because it's not far from a DFC, not far from the campus. So I can imagine if you now take it and put it on campus. My personal view is it's not a good idea. I'm not sure, yes, they are saying we are adults and all that, but I think we need at some point to put, measures in place to ensure that it's not so easily accessible, because then even if you're looking at first years, they are the first ones who become victim of alcohol or because of alcohol. So if you ask me, I don't think it's a good idea. What we can do is to ensure that our students are safe once they leave campus. For instance, we have safe routes, which most of the campuses also have. Rather secure the safe routes and all that. I think that's my personal view. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I also think on a personal level, it will be calling for disaster. Because if, like I had referred to the sporting event that happens once a year here in the Eastern Cape, you will find that is a sporting event, but at night it turns out to be New Year's Eve. And if we were to have a bar in our campuses, then we would have to make sure that our students, they understand the issue of limit. You know how to drink responsibly. because they don't even know when do I get drunk, how do I notice if I'm drunk now. You see, so I think it would be just calling for trouble on alcohol. And he also made that call. So I do not think that it would be such a good idea to have a bar in our campuses.
Let's see what happens in Wales.
I think if we tried to remove the bars from our campuses, there'd be riots.